The Clone Wars had engulfed the galaxy, plunging star systems into chaos and straining the Jedi Order to its limits. Among the most renowned Jedi warriors stood Anakin Skywalker and his former master Obi-Wan Kenobi. Their names echoed from the battlefields of Christophsis to the siege lines of Umbara. Although teacher and student, they were more than that, brothers forged by fire and loyalty. This is a chronicle of their shared trials during the war that reshaped the fate of the Republic. On the planet of Munilinst in the early days of the war, the two Jedi stood atop a crumbling command post surveying a battlefield strewn with twisted droid wreckage and smoke-choked craters. Obi-Wan adjusted his gear, wiping grit from his brow as Anakin impatiently fiddled with the control panel of a downed speeder. Despite their banter, there was a current of respect between them that few could match. The Republic had deployed them to deal with a separatist banking clan outpost rumored to be developing prototype artillery droids with adaptive learning programs. Speed was critical. The longer they delayed, the more entrenched the droids became. Anakin opted for an unconventional strategy. Rather than call for clone reinforcements, he infiltrated the factory complex with a squad of ARC troopers using underground cistern tunnels. Obi-Wan, meanwhile, led a feint attack against the eastern flank, drawing the attention of the main separatist forces. Communication was scarce, and the plan risked separating the two Jedi for too long. But their trust in each other ran deeper than tactical calculation. Inside the factory, Anakin faced swarms of droids adapting faster with each skirmish. Lightsaber in hand, he carved a path toward the command core, disabling the central processing unit, just as the ARC troopers rigged the explosive charges. At the same moment, Obi-Wan's forces retreated into the city outskirts, leading dozens of droid tanks in pursuit. With perfect coordination, Anakin triggered the charges, collapsing the factory and short-circuiting the attacking battalion. In the dusty aftermath, as the sun pierced the gloom, Obi-Wan found his former Padawan waiting on the edge of the ruin with a self-satisfied grin. As the clones regrouped, Obi-Wan shook his head, half in exasperation, half in admiration. Anakin's instinct had nearly gotten them killed again, but it had worked. That mission marked one of many moments when their contrasting styles saved one another. Obi-Wan's meticulous discipline and Anakin's daring spontaneity were not at odds, they were complementary. Together, they formed an unstoppable force, capable of turning tides across the stars. Yet beneath every victory, the war carved deeper into their hearts and minds. As the war dragged on, every campaign became a chapter in a saga of camaraderie, courage, and growing unease. The galaxy changed them even as they fought to preserve it. But on that war-scorched day on Munilinst, their bond remained unshaken, their legacy only just beginning. Weeks later, the Jedi were dispatched to the Fogladon world of Cato Nemoidia, a planet of hanging cities and swaying bridges suspended over bottomless gorges. The Separatists had begun infiltrating the Neimoidian leadership, attempting to draw the planet into their fold. Obi-Wan kept a wary eye on their surroundings, his senses extended through the Force. They soon discovered the sabotage had come not from outside, but from a rogue Jedi General Pong Krell, presumed killed weeks prior in a failed assault on Felucia. Twisted by his lust for power, Krell had defected and established a shadow network among Neimoidian nobles, exploiting the local tensions for his own gain. Obi-Wan approached, resting a hand on his shoulder, reminding him that fear and doubt were natural, but they must not guide his path. In their quiet moments, the Jedi rarely spoke of such things, but they were there in every glance, in every silence shared between battles. The Clone Wars were not just fought in the stars, but in the hearts of those who carried its burden. Anakin nodded, but his thoughts were elsewhere. Each mission brought him closer to something he couldn't yet name, a churning storm inside that no battlefield could quiet. He respected Obi-Wan more than anyone in the galaxy. Yet part of him questioned everything he was taught. The Republic needed a swift, yet discreet intervention. Anakin and Obi-Wan arrived under diplomatic pretense, but the welcome was anything but cordial. Their starship was sabotaged mid-landing, forcing a crash that left them stranded on the outer fringes of a decaying sky city. With no time to regroup, Anakin took the lead, navigating the mist-veiled walkways with the kind of intuition that bordered on clairvoyant. Tracking him through the labyrinthine structures proved treacherous. Krell had laid traps and had a band of disillusioned clones at his command. The confrontation came at twilight on a weathered bridge high above the chasm. The wind howled and lightning flickered across the horizon. Anakin confronted Krell head-on, while Obi-Wan dueled the turncoat S-guards in a dizzying dance of saber and breath. Krell was a force of raw brutality, wielding twin blades and no longer restrained by the Jedi Code. He taunted Anakin with visions of betrayal, claiming the Republic was already lost, and that Anakin's power would only be shackled by blind loyalty. But Anakin held firm his strikes, furious yet controlled. Obi-Wan joined the battle, disarming the last of Krell's forces, and together they overwhelmed the former Jedi. Rather than kill him, they imprisoned Krell for trial, hoping still that justice might remind the galaxy of what the Jedi stood for. The clone troopers they rescued looked at the Jedi with a newfound mixture of reverence and unease. Krell's betrayal had shaken their faith, and the lines between ally and enemy had blurred. As they waited for extraction, Anakin stood near the edge of the bridge, staring into the abyss below. That night, the war stole another sliver of innocence. Though the mission was deemed a success, it left scars no healing could erase. The call to action led them next to the Outer Rim mining colony of Skako Minor, where the Techno-Union had seized control of critical communication towers. Intelligence hinted at an encrypted signal source potentially broadcasting tactical data to separatist fleets. Anakin's approach was swift and brutal, engaging a squadron of droid enforcers in a flash of blue light and blaster fire. The designs mirrored those used on Geonosis, but had been refined with cybernetic implants and primitive neural interfaces. It wasn't just technology, it was evolution forced at blaster point. But volatile, and more than a few whispered that he fought like a man with something to prove. Obi-Wan remained quiet but deeply concerned. In Anakin's heart burned a passion that made him a hero of the Republic, but also a candidate for tragedy. The mastermind behind it was Wat Tambor, a Techno-Union foreman who prided himself on efficiency over ethics. Even Rex felt the unease gnawing at the edges of his loyalty. The Jedi were winning battles, but losing ground within themselves. Anakin smiled during the debriefing, but it didn't reach his eyes. Obi-Wan watched his former Padawan walk away, wondering how many more victories they could endure before one broke them completely. When Obi-Wan confronted him, Tambor unleashed a modified enforcer droid that nearly overpowered the Jedi Master before Anakin burst in, igniting his blade with fury. Every skirmish drew him deeper into the facility and deeper into a state of intensity that blurred the line between necessity and aggression. In desperation, Anakin channeled the Force, pulling shattered conduits into a makeshift bridge to recover fragments of the broadcast. His eyes burned with intensity, his grip on the Force pushing limits. Obi-Wan rarely witnessed outside moments of crisis. They retrieved the coordinates of multiple hidden, separatist supply caches strung throughout the Outer Rim. But the real victory came at a cost. Rex noticed it, but said nothing. Like many clones, he admired Anakin's courage and willingness to lead from the front, but the edge in his eyes was hard to ignore. Anakin and Obi-Wan arrived under cover of night, their dropship, narrowly evading anti-air batteries that lit the skies like a storm. The terrain was harsh, jagged spires of obsidian rising from a choking mist. But what unsettled them most was the silence. No sign of civilians, only the faint hum of droid patrols and the eerie glow of transmitter pylons. They split up to cover more ground, Anakin flanked by Captain Rex and a scout unit, while Obi-Wan infiltrated the central spire under stealth. Inside the tower, Obi-Wan discovered a laboratory containing suspended stasis chambers, housing prototype droids, hybrids of machine and organic tissue. Together, they brought down the droid, but Tambor escaped, triggering a data purge that collapsed the Tower-S mainframe. As they regrouped, the clone troopers silently exchanged glances. Word had spread of Anakin's command style bold when they left Skako. Minor behind its towers collapsed in the distance, and the cold wind bit harder than before. The Jedi were next sent to the war-torn moon of Jagunda, a forested world veiled in perpetual twilight and cloaked by native electromagnetic storms. The Separatists had established a cloaking array hidden deep in the jungle, disrupting Republic scanners and shielding a fleet mustering site in orbit. The mission was to dismantle the array, but the terrain and interference made communication nearly impossible. The Jedi found themselves outnumbered and cornered atop a moss-covered structure. As the sentries advanced with buzzing, energy blades, and metallic chants, it resonated with unstable power, sending violent tremors through the jungle. With effort, they severed the Crystal S-link to the Nexus, burying it. Under stone and sealing the chamber with the Force, Obi-Wan sensed it too, but chose not to press. It had begun not just the end of the war, but the beginning of something much darker. And he knew deep down that the galaxy would never be the same. He hoped their bond would be enough to guide Anakin back from the edges he seemed drawn to. The jungle grew still, and the interference vanished. Republic reinforcements landed within the hour, securing the sector and confirming the Separatists had used the natural disruption to mask their fleet movements, which were now exposed to the Republic Navy. Anakin was drawn to it, entranced by its raw potential. He placed his hand upon the crystal, and for a moment the visions come a fire of betrayal, of a dark figure cloaked in shadow, and a galaxy broken under war. The battle was fierce, but the Force flowed strong in both nights. Anakin's aggression proved vital, dispatching enemies with precise fury, while Obi-Wan countered their tactics through misdirection and defense. Together they neutralized the threat and uncovered a hidden passage leading beneath the temple. Anakin and Obi-Wan descended into the thick canopy, accompanied only by a single squad of clones, navigating by instinct and intuition alone. The jungle was alive with unseen dangers. Massive predatory creatures stalked the shadows, and even the trees seemed to shift with unnatural rhythm. Anakin felt the pulse of the world around him, chaotic and primal. Obi-Wan focused his awareness, calming his breath and guiding the squad through the unknown. As they advanced, they discovered evidence of an ancient civilization long since overtaken by the wilderness. Crumbling ziggurats half swallowed by vines revealed strange carvings that mirrored Jedi iconography, albeit distorted and older than any archives recorded. While investigating the ruins, they triggered a dormant defense system, awakening automated sentries infused with ancient weaponry. There they discovered the true source of the interference, not a separatist array, but a Force nexus corrupted and amplified by a shard of kyber crystal embedded within the ruins. Obi-Wan pulled him back, urging caution, reminding him that the crystal was not meant to be wielded, but understood. As they departed Jagunda, Anakin remained unusually silent. He had felt something in that chamber, something that clung to his soul like ash. That night under the jungle stars, Anakin watched the sky shift above and whispered a single phrase to himself, not of hope or fear, but of destiny. Weeks passed, and the war intensified. Intelligence reports drew Anakin and Obi-Wan to the icy moon of Zepho Prime, where Separatist scientists had been experimenting with kyber crystal reactors to create a localized gravitational weapon. As they moved deeper, Anakin began feeling strange echoes in the Force fragments of suffering, flashes of reverence for a power long suppressed. The lead scientist, a cold, analytical Umbreon named Vrata, tried to stall them with theories of evolution through chaos. He spoke of the Force as a pattern to be rewritten, not followed. Aboard the Republic cruiser, Obi-Wan confronted Anakin. He admired his bravery, but feared his recklessness. Anakin waved it off as necessity. He watched and waited. He no longer saw only the boy he once trained, but a man standing at the crossroads of destiny. What path Anakin would take was hidden even from the Force. But one truth rang louder each day. The Clone Wars were no longer just about Republic and Separatists. They were becoming a crucible for everything the Jedi believed, and the fire was only growing. But the toll on his body and spirit lingered. He had seen something inside that Mountain Man image of power without chains, of a galaxy reshaped by will rather than compromise. He didn't speak it aloud, but it etched itself behind his eyes. Anakin confronted him with disdain, but also curiosity. The concept of shaping destiny rather than submitting to it resonated more than he cared to admit. Sensing layers to the conflict that defied political explanation, Yoda said little, but his silence was heavy. The Council's trust in Anakin was growing strained, and yet they continued to rely on him more than ever. Obi-Wan noted the architectural style mirrored that of early Jedi temples, but warped, as if the builders had begun in harmony with the Force and then diverged. The system resisted, its feedback loops overloading. Anakin bypassed protocol, channeling the Force directly into the control mechanism, a dangerous maneuver that nearly cost him his life. Doiwan stabilized him, guiding him out just as the mountain began to rupture from within. They escaped through a collapsing ice tunnel, emerging into blinding daylight as the peak behind them cracked and folded in on itself, entombing the forbidden energy once more. The presence in the chamber was neither light nor dark, but something older. The facility was buried beneath a glacier, riddled with unstable tunnels and ancient Zephonian ruins. The mission was simple on the surface: sabotage the reactor and evacuate before the meltdown. But nothing in the Clone Wars was ever simple. They entered through a fissure in the ice, descending into a tomb of ancient echoing halls lined with forgotten statues and inscriptions in a language lost to time. Upon locating the reactor, they discovered the Separatists had failed to harness the crystal's power it had fused with the mountain itself, sending shockwaves through both technology and terrain. With time short, the Jedi evacuated personnel and began the shutdown.
Later.
The mission was classified a success, but the incident was sealed from public record. The Jedi Council worried about what had been uncovered. As for Obi-Wan, weeks passed and the war intensified. Intelligence reports drew Anakin and Obi-Wan to the icy moon of Zepho Prime, where Separatist scientists had been experimenting with kyber crystal reactors to create a localized gravitational weapon. As they moved deeper, Anakin began feeling strange echoes in the force fragments of suffering, flashes of reverence for a power long suppressed. The lead scientist, a cold, analytical Umbara named Vrata, tried to stall them with theories of evolution through chaos. The system resisted, its feedback loops overloading. Anakin bypassed protocol, channeling the Force directly into the control mechanism, a dangerous maneuver that nearly cost him his life. Anakin waved it off as necessity, but the toll on his body and spirit lingered. The Jedi Council worried about what had been uncovered, sensing layers to the conflict that defied political explanation. Yoda said little, but his silence was heavy. The Council's trust in Anakin was growing strained, and yet they continued to rely on him more than ever. He had seen something inside that Mountain An image of power without chains, of a galaxy reshaped by will rather than compromise. He no longer saw only the boy he once trained, but a man standing at the crossroads of destiny. What path Anakin would take was hidden even from the Force. But one truth rang louder each day: the Clone Wars were no longer just about Republic and Separatists. They were becoming a crucible for everything the Jedi believed, and the fire was only growing. He didn't speak it aloud, but it etched itself behind his eyes. Obi-Wan stabilized him, guiding him out just as the mountain began to rupture from within. They escaped through a collapsing ice tunnel, emerging into blinding daylight as the peak behind them cracked and folded in on itself, entombing the forbidden energy once more. He spoke of the Force as a pattern to be rewritten, not followed. Anakin confronted him with disdain, but also curiosity. The concept of shaping destiny rather than submitting to it resonated more than he cared to admit. Obi-Wan noted the architectural style mirrored that of early Jedi temples, but warped, as if the builders had begun in harmony with the Force and then diverged. The presence in the chamber was neither light nor dark, but something older. The facility was buried beneath a glacier riddled with unstable tunnels and ancient Zephonian ruins. The mission was simple on the surface: sabotage the reactor and evacuate before the meltdown. But nothing in the Clone Wars was ever simple. They entered through a fissure in the ice, descending into a tomb of ancient echoing halls lined with forgotten statues and inscriptions in a language lost to time. Upon locating the reactor, they discovered the Separatists had failed to harness the crystal's power it had fused with the mountain itself, sending shockwaves through both technology and terrain. With time short, the Jedi evacuated personnel and began the shutdown. Later, aboard the Republic cruiser, Obi-Wan confronted Anakin. He admired his bravery but feared his recklessness. The mission was classified a success, but the incident was sealed from public record. As for Obi-Wan, he watched and waited. The next assignment pulled Anakin and Obi-Wan to the industrial system of Nixer, where Separatists had established a shielded manufacturing world orbiting a dying sun. Intelligence from Republic spies indicated the site was mass-producing prototype battle droids powered by energy siphoned directly from solar flares. The planet's magnetic storms and collapsing star made standard approaches suicidal, but as usual, Anakin saw opportunity in danger. They flew into the atmosphere under heavy fire, navigating plasma surges and gravitational fluxes that threatened to tear their ship apart. The Separatists were not only learning how to replicate Jedi technology, they were weaponizing it. It nearly overwhelmed both Jedi, mimicking their stances and intercepting Force movements. Obi-Wan was knocked unconscious mid-battle, leaving Anakin to fight alone. His anger surged, not reckless but focused, and with a surge of raw will, he crushed the droid's core with the Force. The energy backlash fried several consoles and shattered the viewing panels, but the silence that followed felt like victory. Obi-Wan felt the weight of this realization settle deep. The line between the sacred and the profane was vanishing. As they evacuated, Anakin remarked that soon there would be enemies the Jedi could not outthink, only outmatch. But for the Jedi, it was another harbinger. Technology was evolving faster than wisdom. Power was being reshaped in ways they could not foresee. And in Anakin, that evolution had already begun. Obi-Wan was troubled by the words, but more so by the way they were said. They weren't speculation, they were certainty. Anakin stared at one of the shattered saber hilts for a long moment, his expression unreadable. When he finally spoke, it was with a voice calm but devoid of warmth. If they can mimic the Force, they'll try to replace us. Anakin's reckless piloting skill turned what should have been a suicide. Run into a daring landing amid the upper platforms of the production towers. They fought in coordinated flocks, adapting within seconds. Anakin relished the challenge, slicing through in a dance of fire and fury, while Obi-Wan analyzed their patterns, finding their vulnerability and exposed cooling valve on the back of each unit. Working together with the clones, they disabled the central tower, but the deeper they pushed into the facility, the more disturbing its purpose became. Obi-Wan, grim as ever, held back commentary until their boots hit the scorched deck. "Next time, let me pick the route," he muttered, brushing ash from his robes. Inside, they encountered a new class of droid, agile, multi-limbed, capable of limited force resistance due to electromagnetic counterpulses built into their systems. They uncovered experiments on kyber energy absorption using captured Padawan lightsabers as conduits. In the control hub, they faced off against an experimental command droid capable of predictive combat routines. Obi-Wan woke to Anakin standing still amid the wreckage, his eyes distant. There were no cheers, no witty remarks, only quiet. The mission's data would be invaluable to the Republic, and the facility's destruction marked a rare strategic triumph. Beneath his cloak, he kept one of the shattered lightsaber crystals from the lab, its glow faint but steady like a question that would not be silenced. The next mission brought them to the scorched fields of Moritaris, a once thriving world now consumed by ceaseless battle. Republic analysts had traced the movement of a rogue separatist warlord, General Nix, emerging beneath the fortress walls. Their Nix had prepared for them. Obi-Wan and Anakin moved in perfect rhythm, an old harmony forged through years of trust. Together, they struck, disarming him and forcing him to yield. The general collapsed in silence, not with rage, but with a strange satisfaction, as if confirming something he had long suspected. The stronghold was laced with sonic disruptors that scrambled force perception and holographic decoys that mimicked friendly signatures. The battle that followed was disorienting and vicious. Moritaris was saved, but at what cost? The Jedi were being hunted, not just physically but philosophically. They're won by choosing the kind of man you wish to remain. And slowly, Anakin saw the arguments of his enemies begin to echo in his mind, twisting into questions he couldn't silence. Anakin fought through confusion and traps, pushing forward with sheer willpower. Obi-Wan used patience and sharp instinct, anchoring their progress with tactical strikes and defensive positioning. To the planet's northern hemisphere, they found Nix, not in armor, but in a command chamber lit by real fire, surrounded by battle plans carved into the walls like scripture. He welcomed them, not as enemies, but as prophets of a failing age. He claimed the Jedi had become symbols, not warriors. Relics wrapped in robes who played at peace while sending soldiers to die. Anakin's fury erupted at his words, igniting a clash that shattered walls and melted steel, where he had commandeered a derelict fortress city and established a mobile operations center. Nix was not like other droid generals. He was human, brilliant, unpredictable. Obi-Wan joined. Flowing between Nix's relentless strikes and Anakin's explosive momentum. But the general had a trick of his own. He had injected himself with an experimental serum that heightened reflexes and pain resistance to near-inhuman levels. Even wounded, Nix laughed. He told Anakin that the war had already decided what kind of man he was becoming. All that remained was to admit it, as known to target Jedi personally. The Council feared he sought more than victory. He wanted to break the myth of Jedi invincibility. Anakin and Obi-Wan arrived on the edge of a burning plain. Guided by local resistance fighters whose homes had been razed by Nix's campaign, the air reeked of ash and melted steel. The planet bled war. Each ruin told a story, and each survivor bore witness to the price of this endless conflict. Anakin took it personally. He had seen too many worlds like this, and every time the desire to end it, all swift and final, grew stronger. They infiltrated the outer perimeter using abandoned sewer routes. In the heart of the fortress, the duel raged through the crumbling compound. In the end, it wasn't strength that defeated Nix, it was unity. After the battle, Anakin stood at the ruins, gazing toward the smoking horizon. Obi-Wan placed a hand on his shoulder. "Victories aren't only won with sabers," he said gently. Anakin didn't answer. He watched the smoke curl toward the sky and thought not of peace, but of the day when he wouldn't have to choose anymore. An urgent transmission redirected them to the capital world of Korrilag, where a former Republic senator had broken ranks and established an independent regime. Though officially neutral, the system had begun supplying separatists with weapons and intelligence. The Republic couldn't risk escalation, so they sent Anakin and Obi-Wan to broker a solution piece if possible, subterfuge if necessary. The Jedi weren't diplomats by trade, but the line between Saber and Senate was growing thinner with every cycle of the war. Tannis tried to flee, but Obi-Wan disabled his ship and restrained him with the Force. What had once been clear victory, justice, peace, now twisted into paradox. Obi-Wan knew the signs. The boy he trained had grown into a storm of certainty and doubt. The war had made him strong, but it also stripped away the layers that protected him from what lay beneath. They transmitted the evidence to the Senate. By the time Korrilag's people saw the truth, it was too late for Tannis. Anakin was beginning to wonder if the enemy had always been external or if part of it now stared back at him in every reflection. He was taken into custody, but his final words haunted Anakin. "You think you've saved them? But they'll remember you as the ones who couldn't let go." Upon arrival, they were greeted with pageantry and polite resistance. The Senator Vorian Tannis welcomed them with hollow charm, masking distrust behind protocol. The planet's population admired him. He had kept Korrilag safe while other systems burned. But his methods grew more authoritarian each day, and whispers of suppression and secret prisons filled the undercurrents. Anakin saw only hypocrisy. Obi-Wan, ever cautious, advised restraint. Their goal was to uncover Tannis's true loyalties and dismantle his separatist links without turning public opinion. Over the course of several days, they played the game, galas, councils, and carefully phrased discussions beneath chandeliers and surveillance. Yet Anakin chafed under the pretense. He followed leads through the city's underbelly, discovering shipments of forbidden tech routed through shell companies. In the shadows of neon alleys, he confronted black market engineers, pressuring them for names. Obi-Wan warned him not to act on impulse, but the divide between careful observation and direct justice was wearing thin. Eventually, they tracked the flow of weapons to an abandoned palace on the outskirts of the city, now a fortress disguised in neglect. There they uncovered a vast vault of separatist goods and documents proving that Tannis had been selling his people's future for promises of dominion in a post-republic order. As they prepared to expose him, Tannis arrived, flanked by his private guard. The confrontation was cold and unyielding. Tannis claimed the Jedi had no authority, that they were relics enforcing a broken code on a galaxy that no longer wanted it. A fight broke out. Anakin surged forward without hesitation, cutting through guards like wind through leaves. As they departed Korrilag, Anakin sat alone in the gunship, his jaw tight. Not every planet burned, not every victory rang hollow. But moments of clarity were fleeting. The final days of the war lead Anakin and Obi-Wan to the world of Thalara, a former Jedi-affiliated sanctuary that had remained neutral for centuries. Intelligence revealed that a mysterious Signal One, encoded in ancient Jedi language, had originated from the planet's mountains, and the Council believed it might be connected to a buried Sith relic. Thalara felt alive, not just with life but with presence. Each turn triggered memories, illusions drawn from their pasts. Appeared Qui-Gon's voice. Laughter, even visions of defeat yet to happen. The closer they came to the summit, the heavier the Force weighed on them. Anakin's visions were more intense, clearer. He saw Obi-Wan falling, planets burning, and a masked figure standing where he once had. The decision weighed on both of them, but differently. War would soon touch even their quiet world, and the two Jedi carried more than just a report back to Coruscant. They carried the burden of vision of choices that would soon redefine not just them, but the galaxy itself. For Obi-Wan, it was an act of hope that Anakin could still walk the Jedi path. For Anakin, it was a moment of fracture, the first real secret he kept from the Order, not out of strategy, but belief. The Force was strong here, but it shimmered strangely neither. Light nor dark, but both. Locals, known as the Veilari, were Force-sensitive, but not Jedi, one he would fight alone. They practiced balance in its truest sense and greeted the Jedi with warmth tempered by caution. They feared that the galaxy-esque conflict would corrupt Thalara as it had every other place touched by war, though reluctant to disturb a world sacred to Jedi history. The threat of dark knowledge falling into separatist hands left no choice. They arrived at dawn, the world draped in golden mist and ancient forests untouched by war. As they climbed the mountain toward the signal's origin, the path tested more than their endurance. For the first time, he spoke his fear aloud. What if the Jedi were wrong? What if balance required ending everything they clung to? Obi-Wan didn't argue. He simply stood beside him and said, "Then we'll face it together, as we always have." At the summit, they found the Sorcin ancient shrine containing a fragmented holocron of both Jedi and Sith design. It pulsed with memory and prophecy. When Anakin touched it, the relic flared to life, revealing glimpses of futures he could barely comprehend. Temples fallen, and one truth echoed through it all. He stood at the center. The chosen one, yes, but not in the way he was taught. Balance would not come through. Peace it would come through destruction and rebirth. Obi-Wan urged him to step back, to let the council decide. But Anakin hesitated, torn between duty and destiny. In the end, they sealed the shrine beneath stone in time, choosing not to bring it to the council. As they left Thalara behind, the Veilari watched in silence, their expressions unreadable. And though the Clone Wars still raged across stars and systems, Anakin Skywalker had already begun another war one no blade could solve, and no master could guide him through. The war's momentum churned endlessly, dragging systems and souls into its undertow. Anakin and Obi-Wan were summoned to Felucia once more, where pockets of resistance threatened a tenuous Republic hold. Blaster marks carved into trees, saber burns in midair, and soldiers' gear left untouched as if they vanished mid-step. The jungle felt haunted. Obi-Wan's intuition screamed caution. Anakin pressed forward, eyes narrowed, heart racing. Each step pulled him deeper into the unknown and farther from the man he once was. The terrain was wild titanic fungi, bioluminescent swamps, and a thick mist that veiled friend from foe. The incident was dismissed as another casualty of war-induced madness, and the mission was marked as complete. But Obi-Wan knew better. So did Anakin. There they encountered a lone warrior masked, robed in tattered cloth, and wielding dual sabers of unstable crimson. Not the peace of understanding, but the pause before something breaks. Outside, the Clone Wars raged on. Inside, a story shifted. He introduced himself only as Maquis, a former Jedi who had disappeared early in the war. Maquis claimed to have seen visions of the Republic's fall, the Order's betrayal, and a fire that would consume them all. He had abandoned the Jedi not for power, but for clarity. Clone troopers had gone missing during reconnaissance, and whispers of an unknown presence filled calms with static and fear. He challenged Obi-Wan's faith and accused Anakin of already walking the path of destruction. The jungle's silence, the visions from Thalara, and now this threads pulling tighter around a truth he could not yet name. He felt watched, not by an enemy, but by destiny itself. Anakin, seething, struck without restraint, forcing Maquis to yield after a prolonged duel. But the warrior did not resist capture. Instead, he knelt and said softly, "You'll understand soon, you especially." What began as a recovery mission shifted swiftly into something stranger. The Jedi discovered signs of battle without enemies. Eventually, they traced the disturbance to an ancient grove, where Force energy spiraled unnaturally. The confrontation that followed was fierce but almost meditative. Machias fought like wind fluid, defensive, relentless only in purpose. Later, aboard their cruiser, Obi-Wan pondered Machias's words, while Anakin remained restless, pacing near the observation window. The Jedi Council interrogated Machias, but he revealed nothing further, only smiled when asked about Anakin. As the cruiser drifted into hyperspace, stars stretching endlessly ahead, a rare silence fell between Master and Knight, and in the distance shadow moved slow, certain, inevitable. A ripple in the Force brought Anakin and Obi-Wan to the skies above Kamino. The cloning facility's heart of the Republic's war machine had gone dark. Lightning crackled without pause, and the ocean below churned as if something deeper stirred. Security footage revealed them being herded into the ocean-facing vaults by a masked figure wielding twin red sabers, fluid and calculating. They would later learn. Tyros awaited them at the heart of a reactor room, suffused with flickering plasma conduits and the thrum of unspoken power. There were no words. The duel erupted like a storm within the storm. Clone troopers assisted in evacuation, while Anakin led a desperate bid to stabilize the reactors. In the chaos, Anakin stood on the edge of the platform, soaked in seawater and silence. Obi-Wan approached, concern etched across his features. Yoda believed he was a herald of a storm long foretold. But only Anakin felt the pull of what lay beneath, for in Darth Tyros' voice, he heard his own doubts reflected uncomfortable truths cloaked in opposition, but said nothing. What words could reach a man already drifting from the shore? He entered the neural chamber where developing clones were suspended. There he saw them. Thousands of blank faces, all identical, all destined for war. In their silence, he saw himself. Anakin clashed with Tyros in vicious flurries, his blade dancing with raw emotion. Obi-Wan moved with grace and discipline, searching for weaknesses in the storm. A shadow in the Sith's growing storm, unknown to the Council but known to Anakin in ways he couldn't explain. Kamino lived. But the future had shifted again. Though the Jedi still saw stars and systems, Anakin was beginning to see shapes behind them, shapes that watched and waited and whispered only to him. He whispered prophecy and poison, naming Anakin the unshaped blade, forged for something greater than servitude, to an order that feared change. He taunted Obi-Wan with failure, with the impossibility of guiding a soul too immense, too destined to be contained. Their blades ignited sparks, not only in metal, but in thought. The encounter to come would not be their first only, the first in the open. Their gunship met resistance before even touching the landing platform stealth droids, not separatist-made but of unknown origin, sleek, silent, and cloaked in dark alloy. They fought not to win, but to delay. That worried Obi-Wan more than any number of blasters. Communications ceased. Sensor readings flickered with anomalies, and whispers spread of unknown ships breaching the orbital perimeter. The Jedi were dispatched not only as generals, but as guardians of the galaxy's most fragile cornerstone. The army bred for a war no longer clean or clear. Upon arrival, the storm howled with unnatural rage. Inside the cloning labs, halls were dim and flooded, signs of internal sabotage. Clones stood at alert, confused but loyal. Kaminoans were missing. As they reached the main facility chamber, the air shifted. Tyros fought not to kill, but to provoke. An explosion rocked the chamber. Tyros vanished into shadow, fleeing through the collapse. The facility began to sink. They saved the structure barely. But something had been lost that day. A sense of control, perhaps. The Council convened. Some urged that Tyros was a new threat. Ocean calmed. The stars shifted again, and this time they led Anakin and Obi-Wan to the wild expanse of Jakara's. A frontier world choked in perpetual dusk, where the war moved like myth more than strategy. Rumors told of a Jedi outpost rediscovered long abandoned before the Clone Wars, untouched by both Republic and Separatists. But what intrigued the Council was the beacon it had begun transmitting. Not a distress call, but an invitation. In the language of the first Jedi, the two Jedi landed amid twisted canyons and shimmering stone arches. Following the pulse of the signal through sand-choked passages, the outpost lay buried beneath a ridge of obsidian, its entrance unlocked not by technology, but by presence in the Force. Inside, they found preserved text scrolls and holocrons sealed in time, untouched by flame or decay. Anakin walked with a purposeful gait, no longer questioning destiny but entertaining it. A mirror not to who they were, but to what they might yet become. Obi-Wan felt the shift, and for the first time, he feared he was no longer walking beside his brother, and the galaxy was already beginning to feel the heat of that revelation. But following a step behind into a darkness lit only by trust, a meditation sphere, ancient in its patterning, where time slowed. They entered it together, but emerged apart in experience. Obi-Wan saw flashes of the High Republic, of guardians who watched and served but never ruled. He saw peace built slowly, patiently. Anakin saw flame, saw empires crumbling, sabers drawn between shadows, and himself not fallen but risen through fire, not lost but reborn. The architecture whispered of Bogan and Ashla, the old names for dark and light, not as enemies, but as aspects in balance. As they explored, the outpost responded to Anakin. Lights flared at his approach. Doors slid open. One chamber lit with images from his own past moments no one else could have recorded. Visions of his mother, of Tatooine skies, of smiling through sunlight. Obi-Wan watched warily, troubled not by the place, but by its choice of resonance. The Force here was not guiding it, was observing. Deep within, they discovered a chamber unlike the others. When the trance broke, neither spoke of what they saw. The silence hung thick as they prepared to leave. But something had awakened within Anakin, and the outpost no longer felt neutral. Felt like an answer waiting to be given shape. Tool forged without allegiance, waiting only for the one bold enough to wield it. As they departed, the beacon ceased. The outpost returned to stillness, no longer revealing its path. The war would move on, systems gained, systems lost. But Jakara's had offered something neither Republic nor Separatists ever could. A glimpse of truth, unburdened by allegiance. And in that reflection, Anakin's eyes burned not with doubt but with resolve. The war hadn't changed him, it had revealed him. The galactic front line shuddered again, and this time, where shadowed towers blocked the sun, and forgotten industrial zones housed thinkers and traders alike. Their target, a slicer known only as Cessair, a former Republic codebreaker now operating beneath the radar, feeding both sides with surgical precision. The Council hoped to recover or silence her quietly. She merely said the galaxy deserved to choose whom it followed, not be told. She handed over the data willingly. Anakin watched as the Council debated ethics in place of accountability. There's not one mention of the pain in those transmissions. There's not one whisper of apology to the forgotten. Obi-Wan offered only a quiet thank you and a clasp on the shoulder. It was meant as reassurance, but it landed like stone, knowing it wouldn't be released. The Order wouldn't allow it. Obi-Wan left in silence, his face tight. Anakin lingered, asking her why she hadn't run. The Jedi Temple still gleamed, ivory tower atop a world of shadows. But Anakin had stood in both light and dark, and he was no longer sure which side still held the truth. "You don't run from what you are," she said, "even if the world insists you're something else, suspected something in the city's distant breath." He stood on a catwalk, overlooking the endless drop of Coruscant's lower levels, thinking of the truths we bury and the myths we uphold. Deeper that this mission had less to do with archives and more to do with monitoring him, the call came from within. Coruscant itself, the heart of the Republic, stood on the precipice of unease. Now reconfigured into a command center bristling with stolen data. But she was expecting them. Cessair was no warrior. She fought with words and truths. She welcomed them into her lair with a calm only conviction could grant. Then she showed them. Whispers of unrest in the underworld districts had swelled into a low roar, not of rebellion, but of revelation. A data leak from deep within the archives threatened to expose inconsistencies in Jedi intervention across key battles. Propaganda or truth, none could say. But it had implications for the war, for faith in the Order, and most delicately for Anakin Skywalker. The Jedi Council summoned Obi-Wan and Anakin not to battle, but to investigate a lead traced to the work sector, disguised in civilian garb. The two Jedi descended into the Undercity, blending with the murmurs of refugees, smugglers, and lost causes. Anakin moved with discomfort, This world reminded him of the streets of Tatooine, of powerlessness. Obi-Wan, ever composed, walked as one familiar with guilt. In these streets, the war was a myth. Only hunger and survival remained. They tracked Cessair to an abandoned transport control hub, records of battles repurposed. Jedi decisions rewritten to fit Republic narratives. Operations that conveniently vanished from Senate review. But what froze, Anakin, were the audio files and cut field transmissions where he could hear himself, unedited, unfiltered, his rage, his choices. Moments when the line between Jedi and Destroyer blurred, Cessair made no demands. Back in the temple, the data was sealed. That night, Anakin returned alone to the works. Cessair was gone, only silence remained and far above.